Hey guys, I'm back. Welcome back to the channel. Now, I have not done a review or a quick review for a movie since Companion, which is a movie that came out 31st of January. So in today's video, I thought, instead of just doing quick reviews or reviews for these movies individually, I'll just go over them all in one big recap video. So in today's video, I'm going to go over everything I saw from February to March of this year and just give my brief thoughts on them. It's worth noting that one film I haven't seen yet that I do really want to is Flow, which finally came out in UK cinemas March 21st. I haven't seen that yet. I do still want to. I'll try and see it soon. Maybe I'll do a quick review for it on the channel. So without further ado, let's begin with this recap video. So starting off, two movies that came out in the UK at the beginning of February, September 5th and Dogman. I made a community post discussing my thoughts on these two movies, so if you haven't seen that already and you want to know my thoughts on them, feel free to go ahead and check that out. First movie we'll be talking about here, Captain America Brave New World. Yeah, it's sad to see the MCU go back to this after Deadpool and Wolverine. Starting off with positives, I think Anthony Mackie's Sam Wilson is a solid lead, which is something I was very happy with considering the fact that it's always a gamble putting a side character in a lead role. As a character, he doesn't have enough development or interesting traits to be a compelling lead in this film, and you obviously can't compare him to Steve Rogers, but in terms of Anthony Mackie's performance, his kind of screen presence, and his ability to hold his own, I thought he was decent enough. I also appreciate the fact that this film at least tries to be a bit more grounded, and I do genuinely think it starts off interestingly, but by the time you get to the end of the film, I think it kind of fails at being a grounded political thriller, and there are some fun scenes in here, especially the Red Hulk battle, even though the CGI in that scene is rough. I also appreciated how this felt like a pretty comfortable addition to the MCU, and by that I mean it does a decent enough job of feeling like a part of a larger cinematic universe and feeling connected to the other movies. Obviously, people have pointed out how this kind of feels like a sequel to The Incredible Hulk, and how this feels like it's trying to tie up some loose ends in the MCU for a lot of it, which a lot of people have criticized, and I get that, but I do like how it feels like a part of a larger franchise with that element of it. But yeah, this is simply a poorly constructed film. It's very obvious that this film is a result of a troubled production, and it feels like it was just messed up in the editing process. Speaking of editing, the actual editing in terms of cuts and stuff of 2 moments in this is really poor for some reason. So much of the dialogue is uninteresting exposition, the story is very rough, and it is clear that this thing was reshot and reworked to hell with painfully obvious green screen. The villain is very weak and notably unintimidating as well. Yeah, not unwatchable, but not good either. 5.5 out of 10. Also, February 14th, Valentine's Day, we have Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy. Just getting straight to the point here, I think this is an incredibly solid continuation of, and as it's described as, conclusion to the Bridget Jones series. The first kind of half of this basically just delivers what you want from a Bridget Jones movie. You get the same type of humor, the same kinds of situations, all that stuff, and it's all done well, and Renee Zellweger and Hugh Grant continue to be very strong in their roles, and the cast overall is solid. But as you move into the kind of back half, the movie starts to become this interesting exploration of grief as it looks at how the loss of Mark has affected the characters and how they've dealt with it. It becomes very effective and the emotional beats really hit. I'm not going to pretend it needs to be 2 hours, 4 minutes long, and there are flaws here, but overall, a very solid finale to the Bridget Jones series, delivering on what fans want while also bringing its own stuff into the mix. 6.5 out of 10. Then February 21st, we had The Monkey, the latest film from Osgood Perkins, a black humor horror comedy with a killer wind-up monkey doll at the center of it. Now, there is some funny stuff in here. It delivers on delightfully exaggerated kills, although these can be held back a bit by poor CGI. My main issue with the film is that it, I guess, takes its foot off the gas a bit too much, if you know what I mean. For a 98-minute long film with this premise, there is no reason for so much of this film to be as dry as it is, and I know the film is heavy on dry humor, but that's not what I'm talking about. The first kind of portion of this movie is about the origin of the titular monkey and how the characters got to where they are today, and honestly, this part goes on for longer than it needs to, in my opinion. I get the fact that it's the issue of fitting a whole backstory into an under 100-minute movie when the whole movie isn't about that, but come on. It genuinely feels like this went on for as long as it did, literally to extend the runtime to over 90 minutes because they didn't know how else to. Honestly, this reminded me a bit of Cocaine Bear, where it delivers on what you pay to see, but it's just not on the level of constant insanity that you want. 5.5 out of 10. February 21st also saw the release of I'm Still Here in the UK finally. Now, this is one I wanted to make a full video on back when I saw it. I wanted to make videos on both Emilia Perez and this before the Oscars happened, since they were the two non-English language Oscar-nominated films that people were talking about a lot, and I had many thoughts on them myself. I actually tried filming the Emilia Perez video in my YouTube set, as I call it, but that was back when it was extremely difficult to film there because I hadn't made the upgrades I have now, and the music stand I used to put my microphone on was broken, so I tried holding the microphone with one hand, and 15 minutes in I was done. My hand was getting too shaky, and I ended up not doing those 2 videos. I honestly still want to make a video on this film, especially now that it has won the Best International Feature Film Oscar. Just summing up my thoughts here though, it's great. It's a compelling gut punch of a movie that's also kind of hopeful at the same time, and it features excellent performances, particularly Fernando Torres, obviously, who is just firing on all cylinders throughout the entire thing. So I would like to rewatch it and maybe make a full video on it. Maybe let me know if you guys want to see that, which you probably don't, but I may end up making it anyway. But yeah, 8 out of 10. Then March 7th, we had Mickey 17. This is a fairly interesting film with some really solid performances. It's got some nice unsubtle political commentary and satire in there, and there's even a funny moment or two in this. But honestly, I found this to just be a collection of ideas that really had potential, but I just don't think it all came together well enough to create a truly enjoyable film. I'm so glad this has been working for so many people. I am just not one of those people. I am interested in giving it a rewatch, but from my one watch of it, I didn't really connect with this one. Again, some interesting ideas and some amusing unsubtle satire, but as a whole, I think it's a bit of a mess and I didn't get much out of it. This is my first Bong Joon-ho film, so maybe I'm just not a massive fan of his style, but yeah. It doesn't help that the color palette of the film is quite dull and it's overall not very nice to look at, but that's just a personal nitpick, so feel free to bully me for feeling that way. But it's overlong at 2 hours, 17 minutes. There's some weak CGI in this, and overall, considering the fact that I didn't really connect with this, I actually just found it to be a bit dull. I'm hoping it changes on rewatch, but for now, 5.5 out of 10. March 14th, we had In the Lost Lands. I went into this with expectations that weren't particularly high, and it landed below those expectations. This is a thoroughly uninteresting slog with weak acting, uninteresting characters, and just a lot of general incompetence. If you're a fan of Paul W.S. Anderson's style, you'll probably be less offended by this than I was. All I could think during this was I might have a new least favorite director. It's incoherent, it looks like vomit, the CGI ranges from acceptable to awful. I do really like some of the designs in here, and in terms of putting you in this world from a visual, like aesthetic standpoint, I think it succeeds, but yeah, I was stunned by how awful this was. 2 out of 10. Also, March 14th, we had Black Bag. I obviously didn't watch Steven Soderbergh's other film from this year, Presence. I'll probably get around to that soon though, but this is another one I'm interested in giving a rewatch. It's pretty strong on a technical level, it's well made, stylish, well directed, and has a really solid cast who all give very convincing performances, but maybe it just didn't fully hit on first watch, or maybe it's just not really for me, because I could not get into the story here at all. It really failed to grab me in the way it did for so many other people, which I'm really glad that it did for so many other people, but for me, it wasn't all that riveting, unfortunately, and it somehow felt a bit longer than it is, despite being only 94 minutes. Just my opinion, though. Again, a solidly entertaining spy espionage thriller with a strong cast and really good directing. Just didn't go crazy for it, but again, I am interested in giving it a rewatch. 6.5 out of 10. Also, March 14th, The Electric State. The Russo brothers' latest film is straight to Netflix garbage. Another low point of this year. This film struggles on pretty much every level. It's completely not entertaining, it's painfully unfunny. Its story is cliched and just overall very uninteresting. There's a complete lack of creativity here, the performances are weak, the score is one of the most agonizingly uninteresting ones I've heard in a while. It's an absolute chore to get through at 2 hours and 8 minutes. There is just nothing to this. It is lifeless, bland, and as devoid of soul as a robot. The visual effects are pretty strong, which you would expect from an apparent budget of $320 million. My fellow YouTuber It's Nicky Whitey watched this on the day it came out, then went out and saw In the Lost Lands on the same day. I have no idea how he was able to do such a thing and survive. 2.5 out of 10. I also checked out The Unbreakable Boy around this time as well, which is another one I made a community post about, so feel free to go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. Anyways, next film we're going to talk about is Novocaine, an original action comedy starring Jack Quaid as a man who has a condition where he can't feel pain, which he uses to his advantage as a sort of superpower in his fight to get back the girl he went on one date with after she is kidnapped. So naturally, it was one of my most anticipated films of the year, and I'm glad to say I enjoyed the hell out of it. Now, don't get me wrong, this is far from a standout film, and unless the rest of the year ends up being as weak for movies as it already has been in my opinion, it won't come close to being one of the best of the year for me. It's completely predictable, standard in its storytelling, and pretty forgettable for a lot of it. But in terms of pure entertainment value, it's one of the most fun films of the year so far. It's a completely breezy and undemanding watch that remains high energy and likable throughout. Jack Quaid is incredibly charming, and the rest of the cast is decent as well. It's violent and utilizes its concept nicely. It's genuinely one of the funniest films of the year so far in my opinion. It flies by, and it knows what it is, and it knows what you want, and I was very, very, very satisfied with this. Again, far from great, but I enjoyed it so much in the moment, and considering how rough this year has been for movies so far in my opinion, it's very refreshing to have a movie like this come along. 6.5 out of 10. Anyways, Novocaine finally came out in the UK March 28th. Also March 28th, we had The Beekeeper 2. Now, there is an audience for this type of movie. You know if this movie is for you or not. I consider myself to be a part of that audience. Jason Statham playing Jason Statham, taking down bad guys in brutal ways after an injustice is committed, is the definition of entertaining to me. Unfortunately, a working man struggles from an overlong runtime, awful villains, and an excruciatingly dull plot. Even for a movie like this, it is completely uninteresting throughout the whole thing, and as a whole, it's just not a very entertaining experience. It also tries to put more emotion into it than it should have, and it unfortunately takes itself seriously, resulting in an experience that is overall less fun than it should be. There's fun to be had here. Jason Statham continues to really commit to this type of role, and he is a lot of fun to watch in my opinion, but yeah. Again, I like this type of movie. I want one of these every year, but this one just isn't it in my opinion. 4.5 out of 10. Anyways, that's it for this recap video. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you want to. Let me know what you watched during February to March of this year, what your opinions are on the movies I've talked about today, you know, all that stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, bye bye.